1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get punked, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in they Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the Hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters don't move, whatever click.
So today I'm going to be doing a reaction to a video on Hector Bravo's page called Unhinged. In this interview, he interviews an individual by the name of Brian Lonely James, who does 29 years and talks about being stabbed, I think he said, within his first year of getting to a level 4. Now, I've seen several of Brian's interviews, and one thing I like about him, he's always sincere, he's genuine, and he's honest in his videos, right? And so anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video.
Hector Bravo, Unhinged. Chaos is now in session.
Welcome to Hector Bravo Unhinged, episode number 1. Today's guest is Brian James. Brian spent 29 years as an inmate in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. He has been out for 824 days. Is that correct?
824 days.
824 days. We're going to jump right into it, man. How you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing.
So let me just pause right here and say, man, don't let that go over your head. He said he spent 29 years in prison, man. That's, even though I done 24, just thinking of 29, that's, man, that is a long time. And so just pay attention to how sharp Brian is. Pay attention to, you know, how, I guess you would say, quote unquote, normal he seems, you know. You never just, I guess, realize that by talking to him. And that's just a long time, you know, 29 years, man. A lot of people lose their sanity. A lot of people lose their faith. A lot of people just become bitter. So, yeah, that's, you know, that's just, man, that's a long, long time.
And I was telling you earlier, 1991, I think, was the last time I was in San Diego. I was with my grandparents. We used to always go right here to Mission Bay. So it feels good, man. It feels good.
1991, what was good? Who were the rappers at the time? What was on TV?
Man, I think I was listening to My Posse's on Broadway at the time. I think this is way back. Different Strokes was probably the show at the time. But we used to come every year and we would go to Campland right here. That was sort of like a family tradition.
So I know it's one thing to experience change, generational change, while being out on the streets. For instance, myself, I saw the change from 91 to 2024 out here. How was it for you, man, stepping away for a long period of time and coming back? How did that feel? Did it feel like a time zone of some sort?
Yeah, I mean, it still does. Just, you know, driving through downtown San Diego, just seeing it, the homeless situation, just the energy, how fast everybody's moving, everybody's hustling. And it's not so much, you know, as before. It's like you graduate, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, where nowadays it's not necessarily that. Your life can shoot in a million different directions, and it's just crazy. 824 days. So I'm gathering information and I'm hanging on to the tail of a rocket. That's what it feels like.
Feels good, huh?
Yeah, it feels amazing.
What year did you get in?
I remember when I first got out, one of the main things that I loved to do was pretty much just people watch. I mean, you know, when I ride in the cars, just look at people walking. You know, I love to go to Walmart because there was a lot of people there. And one thing that always used to get me is people, you know, talking on their earpieces. I would hear people talking, and, you know, they would be a couple feet behind me, and I would turn around, you know, and you just, because you hear a person talking, you know, and going to prison at a time before all this technology had came out, you know, you just assume that they're talking to you. And another thing I was struck by is just all the homeless people, man. It seemed like, it was just homeless people everywhere.
Incarcerated in
1993, October.
1993,
Yeah.
October. Man, I told you, my dad graduated the academy in October 1993. He was a CO.
That would make us. Yeah, I was telling. We were both K numbers.
K number,
Yeah, we
huh?
both. Yeah, that was.
Do you have your CDC number memorized?
I have my CDC number tattooed on my back, actually.
No way,
yeah,
dude.
K14664.
All right.
I think I got it probably like in maybe around 2002.
Damn. What was the reason behind that?
I thought it was cool. It was my name. I had a life sentence. I was never going home.
Let me just pause real quick now. He said he had a life sentence, even though I don't know exactly how much time he had, maybe 25 to life or something. But that's what I was saying. That was the mentality. Even though you had life with the possibility of parole, and you was young and naive, once you entered the system and you talked to individuals who had already been doing time, you would talk and run across people who had maybe a 7 to life and had been in jail 30 years on a 7 to life. It's like you just automatically got discouraged. And some people would suddenly then decide, well, since I'm going to be here, man, I might as well throw myself full-fledged into, the mentality, the violence, the hopelessness, so on and so forth.
My cell at the time had done sort of like a portrait of sort of like a gangster dude in handcuffs or something. And it popped in my mind. I was like, throw my CDC number on the back. And I've covered up and removed like a few tattoos over the years, but I'm going to probably hang on to that one.
You're going to hang on to that one?
Yeah, just to remember.
So you got locked up as a juvenile case?
As a juvenile, yeah. I was
How
16,
old were you?
16 years old.
16? Mm-hmm. How old were you when you got arrested?
16.
16.
I got arrested the following day.
How old were you when you touched down at a state penitentiary?
I was 18 years old.
18?
Yeah.
And what prison was that?
Salinas Valley. We opened up Salinas Valley. I was in Wasco. I went to see my counselor, and he said, you're a level 4, you're a 180. There's some new prisons that had just opened up. High Desert had been open a little bit, Salinas Valley. And they dropped that bag in front of my cell about 3 months later, said, put all your property in here. You're going to Salinas Valley. It had been open probably for about a week. When I walked in, there was still like the dust and the concrete like on the floor. And they literally told us like, what job do you want? You want to work in the kitchen? Like what was available? That's how empty the prison was. Buses from Pelican Bay, Folsom.
So you activated Salinas Valley?
Yeah, yeah.
Was it rocking and rolling?
It was rocking and rolling.
Was property getting distributed? Benches for this race, pull-up bars for this
That's
race?
exactly what it was. And, for me at the time, I'm 18, I'm a kid, I'm a teenager. So I just played my role, kept my back against the wall. I watched, I listened, I observed, but yeah, there were murders over benches. There were murders over pull-up bars. People maimed, people slaughtered over water fountains.
So the question.
And that's where I came to Salinas in 96, right? And pretty much the same situation when I got there. I first entered the cell. There's sawdust and bolts and stuff on the on the floor. I was the very first person to go in that cell. When we got off the bus, it was a bus, I believe it was coming from Centinela, and we was the very first people to actually go into that cell, man. And I remember a situation when there was going to be an issue with the Crips and the Whites over a handball court. And like he said, I'm young, I'm observant, I'm just sitting back, I'm not knowing. The Crips are telling the white dudes they cannot play handball in this particular handball court because the Crips were playing in one handball court. Right next to them on the right-hand side, I believe, was the Southern Hispanics, and the whites was trying to play, or they wanted maybe to establish as this court to be theirs. Now I'm sitting back thinking, like I say, I'm young. I don't know how prison works. I'm thinking that these, the Crips, these dudes, how can they tell anybody where they can play handball at, And the whole thing was they did not want to be sandwiched in between the Southerners on the right and whites on the left, who are sometimes allies. So in the event something break off on the yard and it's racial, now you have the brothers who are playing handball in between these two groups who they have historically beefed with. Now, you have their potential lives in jeopardy because of how they're position. So a lot of times strategic planning goes on. And when I got to the yard, I guess people hadn't ran across a lot of metal yet because the prison was so new, but there was definitely a lot of cutting with razors, slicing, dudes cleaning their backyard, so to speak. And the very first stabbing that I actually saw in Salinas was a black dude who stabbed one of his homeboys.
I asked you right before you gave me that information were they more peace talks or was it resolved through violence? And it sounds like it was resolved through violence.
Yeah, it was 100% violence, especially at that time. It wasn't, that was how you gained your respect. And, it's so much different from the times of today, but you had to commit violence. You had to show that you were ready and willing at any second to commit violence.
We're going to dive into that. What was the term that you got sentenced to?
My term was 20 years to life.
20 years to life.
Yeah.
Okay, and I speak often about how when you got all day, that meant life, especially in the 90s.
If there is a letter at the end of your sentence, you're never going home. If 1 year.
So I'm thinking, if I'm correct and I remember how everything works, by him having a 20-year to life sentence, they probably took him to the board around his 19th year in prison. But once again, when you're doing all that time, right, and you have believed from the gate you're not getting home, you're not even programming in a way that could even potentially get you found suitable or get you found eligible for release when you go to the board. A lot of times people have already dug themselves a tremendous hole just having a despondent mindset when they start doing their time.
If 1 day to life, if there's a life sentence at the end, yeah, you're done. You're not going home.
And I need you to explain to me and to the public what the mentality is of an individual walking into a California prison
here we go.
knowing you're never getting out. Is it hopeless?
Initially I went in there with at least some hope. It's impossible as a teenager to accept that I'm going to die in this place right here, despite the fact that, the courts told me that, probation, parole, all these people told me that, you're not going home. You're never going home. So when I did, ultimately, I went in front of the parole board on my second year in prison, and they basically are just going to tell you in 20 years, this is what we expect from you. Your GED or high school diploma, get a trade, get a vocation, stay out of trouble, learn about yourself. And I said, okay, sir, if I check all those boxes right there, will I be able to go home in 20 years? They laughed at me.
Damn.
They laughed at me. They say, your parole officer hasn't even been born yet. So it was in that moment that I gave up. I said, everything I need to learn is right here in the yard. There's no reason for me to go to school. There's no reason for me to get a voc, a trade, or anything. I need to be the best gang member, the best convict that I can possibly be because this is my life.
So when he told you that, you had made the conscious decision, hey, this is the route that I'm going because I have no choice. I have to survive.
And full disclosure, I was already someone that was, geared up and in that lifestyle. So it didn't take much. He just gave me the perfect excuse to go gung ho and just to not care about life and to live. I lived suicidal for damn near 20 years.
Suicidal as in reckless behavior?
Reckless behavior. There's a guard in a tower holding a gun with a Mini 14 and then spray paint on the wall right next to it. No warning shots. Broad daylight, 12 o'clock in front of God and everybody, 20 years old, just stabbing somebody on a yard.
Was there a part of you kind of hoping that gunner would take that shot?
I had moments. There were definitely moments. I wasn't I never had a death wish, but I remember moments where I'm thinking I'm going to stay on this guy. And if whatever, what do I have to lose? I'm going to die in here regardless. But then those moments would go, you'd think about your family and,
right.
Self-preservation would kick in. But I definitely had those moments where I didn't care those days.
I think of course too, it all depends on the individual, right? I was at Salinas Valley. And I remember a situation with two dudes, right? They was crimees. They got caught up on the same case. One of the dudes became frustrated, I guess, and must have felt he was never going home. He got all his transcripts, his legal paperwork pertaining to that case, and he threw them in the trash. He like, man, you know what? I'm never getting out of here, man. He threw it in the trash. The other dude continued to fight, submit his appeal. And I think maybe in 2 or 3 years, his case was overturned and he ended up going home. So it just all depends on, a person's mentality and where that mentality eventually ends up, taking you.
There were really dark days.
It's a question I had been wanting to ask because it's kind of personal, but something I noticed that when young individuals got incarcerated, a lot of those dudes had not been with a woman and they had got life. I mean, you don't have to disclose if that was your situation, but did you ever come across individuals that had never been with a woman and they were incarcerated for life?
Most definitely.
Yeah. It's funny too because that was like the running joke.
Was it?
Yeah, like so many times, like all the juvenile lifers, like, yeah, you're a virgin, well, you know. But I had been, I'm 15, 16 years old, so it wasn't, my body count's not high like a lot of guys in there, bragging they had been out. So it was extremely minimal. But yeah, but there definitely were guys in there that had zero experience.
That's wild, man, because, people think about manhood and stuff like that, and you're thinking this dude just threw that opportunity away, man.
Yeah, and it's a trip, too. I think part of that, I've always thought about that, is I think that sort of contributes to the savagery of the person to a degree.
Oh, of course.
Because, everybody, as a man, every man needs, like, just a taste or
yeah,
something.
Absolutely. And that's why, in the Army and the Marines, the infantry, that's why there was no women at the time frame. It's just you focus on.
Oh, okay.
Savagery.
That makes complete sense. Yeah.
It's just men and testosterone.
And I met a couple of dudes like that, right? One individual in particular that I remember from Ironwood. I was on the C yard with him, or I think was the B yard. Either or, though, right? He came to jail when he was 16, and he had admitted that, he had never been with a woman. Actually, he just hit me with an email maybe about 3 or 4 days ago, right? So you do have these situations, man, where individuals come to prison so young. They haven't experienced anything. They haven't experienced any part of living. A lot of us came to jail, hadn't had apartments, or, many of us were still living with our mom, not in my situation. I had traveled and I had moved to Montana and was in Denver and stuff. But a lot of dudes who I had encountered in prison hadn't had any experiences outside of life in their neighborhood. Dudes hadn't even seen anything, maybe the furthest they may have been away was 35 or 45-minute trip, in the car with their mom or something. So it's just crazy that, how an individual will go to prison at 16 and, do 30 years like this guy.
And the Spartans.
Yeah. But in that joke too, I mean, there probably were a lot more guys, but nobody would openly admit it. Like, but yeah.
But in reality, that's a sad case.
It is. It is. I mean, I know like 50-year-old men that have never been intimate with a woman.
Wow. What is the most hilarious experience in prison and your favorite and worst prison overall?
So the most hilarious, I mean, the first thing that pops to mind is shout out to Conan from Santa Paula, wherever he's at right now, walked out to the day room one day, drunk. He was in Kern Valley, drunk as hell, and just pissed his name all over the wall.
Damn.
Wrote Conan, SP12 on the wall in piss. In the day room. Like, it was hilarious at the time. His ass got whooped for that later on down the line, but that just popped in mind, like right now when you asked me that.
Was everybody laughing?
Everybody was busting up. It was hilarious. And his name's Conan, so he's a big dude. He was a likable dude. It was totally out of character. That's probably what made it. He remembered it the next morning.
Oh. Yeah. See, that's crazy, right? Because a lot of times people think prison is so serious, but there have been, moments in prison where it's almost because after a while you adapt to being in prison, right? So it's almost like, this is where I'm at. This is my home. We have to make the best of it. It's not all misery every day. Dudes are laughing and having fun and doing things, you'll hear crazy stories like this. But of course, obviously now, there was some individuals who definitely in that building who didn't find that funny because of the sanitary of the situation. And even though something like this may have been harmless on the streets, it's viewed as disrespect because you're sharing that building, that day room with other races, so on and so forth. So obviously, yes, I'm sure he has some type of physical discipline meted out to him because of that, because of that act.
Worst prison, Corcoran, because, my time in the shoe right there was probably, I did 9 years back there, probably the most devastating time of my entire life.
What years were those?
2000 and the end, 2006 in the middle, all the way to 2015.
So for the viewers out there, kind of get an understanding how prison works, especially at that time. Life meant life. You weren't going home.
Yeah.
Right. No, not much hope.
No.
Okay. You mentioned putting in work under the gun, which in turn will catch you a shoe term, segregated housing unit.
Yeah.
And this is the time you're talking about Corcoran?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
sitting in the back right there. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about what doing shoe time was back then, because there was a lot of no tablets, no wind-up radios. What was it sitting back there?
So, the shoe is a jail within a jail. In Corcoran, it's bedrock. It's 2 bedrock beds side by side. Underneath it is it's just a cubby hole. You would get a TV after a certain amount of time, and the TV, there's a hole in the wall. They would plug the TV because we can't have access to outlets and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that, fires and things like that. So you would get a TV, and that was it. Your books. If you're a reader, if you're a writer, there were artists in there. You create your own existence in there, but it's basically it's a box, and you create your life.
Now, at the time, because the individual dog cages came later.
Yeah.
Were you there before that?
No, the dog cages were already in place.
They were already
I was in the
place?
Tehachapi shoe before the dog cages, but in Corcoran, when I got there, they were already in place, yeah.
So when he says the dog cage is what he's talking about, and actually I didn't have a shoe, but I was in the hole in Corcoran. I was in Sat F, and at that time, at one point in time when I first came to prison and I went to the hole, they had a big giant. It was almost like a big giant fenced-in cage, and all the Crips would go to yard together. So I've been on yards where there's 25, 30 Crips, and we go out there, we exercise, working out, so on and so forth. But then later on, they came with what he's talking about is the dog cages. And now in these dog cages, when I was in Corcoran, my cellie was Hoover Mike, and it's just 2 people, and it's pretty much like he's talking about. It's like a dog kennel, They got all these different cages side by side. You can see, and actually he's talking about Santa Paula. 2 of my neighbors was from Santa Paula. They was Muggsy and Vandal from Santa Paula, and outside in these dog cages, right? And so you just go out there, and it's pretty much nothing to do. They leave you out there 3 or 4 hours. You walk around, exercise, and they bring you back in. Sometimes I wouldn't even go because it was nothing really pretty much to do but just go outside and get hot and funky. You could, and then you don't get a shower every day. And so, sometimes I'd go out there, but sometimes I wouldn't go because, it's really nothing to do.
And what is it, 23 hours a day in the
Yeah,
cell?
they say it's 24 hours a day one day and then 22 hours a day the next day, because we would get yard Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So every other day you're not going out. Now on Monday, during the winter, there's fog. So erase Monday because you never go to yard during fog, and Tuesday,
Right.
if there's incidents. So those are the numbers, but you rarely meet those, even that standard of numbers.
And the shower.
Oh, let me pause once again and say, man, if anybody happens to know Muggsy or Vandal from Santa Paula, man, tell them I send my shout out. They was 2 cool dudes. My neighbors, they was getting validated and they was being sent to Pelican Bay. They told me that they were cousins or whatever. So shout out to those dudes, man. If anybody happens to know Muggsy or Vandal from Santa Paula.
Every 72 hours.
Every 72 hours, you get 5 minutes. They handcuff you in your tray slot, walk you to the shower. As soon as they take the cuffs off, the shower starts. Guys would take the soap, get soaped up. Remember, put it on their head just to save time. So as soon as the cuffs come off, boom, you're
Rinse.
shaving. Because you got to
Okay.
shave your head, your face. You don't have time to shower. You would do the bird bath.
Right.
Yeah, because you only have 5 minutes.
And I know we were talking prior to this interview about the weights, the tobacco, the porn magazines.
Yeah.
What was it like having all of those incentives, so to say, and then as they started taking things one by one, did you guys feel that, hey, the system is messing with us, the guards are messing with us?
So when I first came in, it was that, I think they probably took the weights. I opened Salinas, so they didn't even put the weights there, but they had the weights on all the other yards. They took them within like the first 6 months. So I never really got to experience the weight pile. They took the family visiting, which I was a lifer. I would not have got family visits either way. But they just started slowly taking one thing. It was the packages, the personal packages. Your family used to be able to.
Now, correction on that. They didn't entirely take the family visiting program. What actually they did is they took the family visiting program from lifers. And so if you were a lifer, you was no longer eligible to get a family visit. Somewhere after 96, I remember asking this dude, man, when we was playing dominoes, and I ain't gonna lie, I was whooping him. I was serving him. And then so his name was JD, and he was from up north. He had just came from Cashapp. And I asked him, hey, man, and I had just got to prison. I'd probably been there maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks or whatever. How do we go about filling out the papers for the family visits? And he said, hey, homie, they didn't took those. He said, man, I just got my last one with my wife in Cashapp. Man, and I was so despondent and just, stressed. I'm like, damn, they took the family visits. He broke it down and explained to me. He ended up whooping my head, in that domino game, man. And after the game, I got up and went on to the cell, man. Just the thought of not being able, to spend some time with, because at that point in time I was married, and just, those family visits were things that really kept lifers, families, coming to visit them and corresponding. And a lot of lifers lost their wives after that, that ruling came out where lifers would no longer get family visiting, because it created a connection. It was a connection that you could look forward to going out there, in a trailer-like setting, spending 2 days with your family, seeing your wife, kids, your mom and dad could come up, whatever. So yeah, that definitely was a devastating blow to anybody who had life and was getting family visits.
The personal stuff to where now you would order them. The porn went. The tobacco went, the clothes went. It was just one thing after another. But in the early days, it was the family visiting was the big one, because I was young and I remember hearing, chatter around and people saying if the family visiting goes, it's going to be a bloodbath in California. Understandable, I guess. This was your only access to your family, and by family visiting, it's 3 days. I never got one.
Yeah.
3 days? Whether
days,
with
weekend,
with your
the
wife,
weekend,
your kids,
yeah.
you get to experience a taste of
Food,
freedom.
cooking in the little kitchen.
Yeah, so I never got to experience that either. But it was supposed to be, and to my knowledge, nothing ever took place. They came and they went. What I did experience, the tobacco, I saw that go. I was never a smoker, so it didn't bother me, but I did see people freak out. And it only made the black market,
Right.
even better. I saw the blues go. We used to have the button-ups. We used to have the Levi's, the belts. You get all Bonnarooed out to where it would just be the jumpsuits, which I liked way better. It was just easier to throw off and on. So, yeah, I mean, for me going in, conditioned and trained the way I was more trained to not want those things, to not desire those things, because they could be used as a tool against me. They could be taken, given. So I learned I lived a basic lifestyle, as what we say in prison. I traveled light.
Traveled light.
Yeah. I kept my basics, my soups, my rice, my beans, my books.
Now, were you schooled that way?
Absolutely.
You were schooled that way. So
most guys, when they come into prison, I don't know if it would like this for officers, but like your first cellies, the first people you're around sort of give you your style, I guess.
That makes sense.
It's who takes you under the wing, I guess.
And at that time frame, there was a lot of good people willing to show you the ropes the correct way.
Yeah,
It was
because
a different era.
Yeah, like we talked, there weren't the things to spoil you. You're going to store, you're spending $100 tops.
Which brings me to another question that reminded me, which was, what would you tell a brand new 20-year-old kid about conducting himself right now?
Sheesh. I mean, I have a policy of, I try not to be preachy or anything. I just give you the facts. If you go this route, this is how it ends. If you go this route, this is how it ends. Are you built for it? Are you built for it? Prison, what you're hearing in these songs is not true. What you're hearing on a lot of these podcasts and these war stories is not true. The majority of the time is you're going to sit alone in a box. Look at the numbers of the people around you that are going to tell on you. There's no future in it. And if you can't accept it from me, then you're gonna have to find out the hard way.
That's actually gonna help a lot of people, man.
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't expect you to say that, dude. But you're right. You're 100% right.
Yeah. If you want to go in there and be a gang member, do that. But understand this: you're gonna get time added.
Facts.
You're gonna lose family members. Hold your ground. Don't tuck tail and run. Stick with it. That's what you did. Or go to a group, learn about yourself.
Right.
Get a trade. Get a business.
How much coping skills or life skills did you have at that young, ripe age of 18 in Salinas Valley, 19 years old?
0. All the issues that led to my incarceration still plagued me. It just kept getting worse. I became a better criminal. I became a better drug addict. I became a better gang member. I was only interested in just the negative aspects of prison, which it was pretty much all negative at that time.
At that
And he's 100% correct. I remember when I was young, hearing some of my older homies talk about going to prison. It was made to seem like it was a glamorous thing, and they used to call prison the College of Street Knowledge because, like he said, you would go there and you would be turned on to a whole new world of things that could potentially, make you a quote unquote, better gang member, so on and so forth. I think it's important things to point out also, though. Back in those times, the time that they was giving out for certain crimes was less severe. I don't remember exactly when, but at some point California got much tougher on crime. And so an attempted murder, which at one point in time you could get 7 years for and do half of that and be home, later on it turned into a life sentence. A murder, you could easily get a voluntary manslaughter, takes 16 years and be home in 8. It's a dude from my hood, man. He's locked up back again, but he went to jail for he killed somebody and came out and then hit somebody else in the head and with a rock or something and went back again. So it was the time for the crime was much less. And so, some of my homies would get out, they'd be physically fit, muscles, women looking all at them and stuff. And so we looked up to that. They never preached about being lonely in prison, people running off on you, not having anything to eat, So it's just, it's important to spread the reality of what's really going to happen when you go to prison. People, like he said, man, people going to walk out of your life. It's going to be hard up in there. Everybody you think is tough is not going to stay down. People going to tell on you. You may have family pass away while you in there. It's definitely different, once you get up in there.
The California Department of Corrections, did they have vocational trades or educational?
I think there was one. There was masonry. They would call it behind the wall.
Yeah.
You'd see about 4 guys because if you have a life sentence and you're a teenager, you're close custody, your points are elevated. I wasn't going anywhere. So I wasn't eligible for the vocations and stuff like that. I was only eligible for school and I didn't have a diploma.
Now, were the inmates just attending those classes and courses just as a way to kill time?
Yeah. Yeah. Just like me, nobody was in there trying to get an education. And
once again, it just all depends, right? Because when I came to the pen in '96, you had some individuals who had life due to the fact that they wasn't going nowhere. They would call them for school. Johnson, report to school. They'd open their door and tell them, hey man, tell them stop calling over here. I'm not coming no more. And they'd slam the door, because at that point also they didn't have many repercussions for convicts refusing to go to school or refusing, getting write-ups or whatever. And due to the fact an individual had life, he didn't care about getting a write-up, and so later on they came with the C status where they would, take your property and send your TV home and stuff like that. But, individuals who wasn't going home, like I was one of those individuals. What is the what is the incentive for me to go out here and get a job? You know, and I've said this many times. My job in prison was trying not to get a job. You know, why would I want to go learn a trade in my mind or do something that I wasn't ever going to be able to put to use? You know, I love to go to the yard and just hang out with the homies and play basketball.
Because what are you going to do with it? I remember thinking, what am I going to do with this?
100%.
I'm never going to get out.
Now, during that time frame, right, because I'm trying to paint the generational changes, what was the rapport with correctional officers like? And I know that there's certain rules that I know, the inmates are not supposed to talk to officers, but overall, the consensus, the vibe, what was the rapport like?
It was really, at that time, it was really intense, but there was like a high level of respect. And I think only because like a disrespect would lead to, a lot of bloodshed. And officers at that time were a lot different than they are now. They were ready to go right there. It was almost like they were another car almost on the yard. So, there was a respect there too, because, the bullets are going to fly. They're going to fight baton. There was one officer, Officer Torres, who he since passed away. He literally came into prison, like it seems like every prison I traveled to. He was a guy, when there was a code, man, he was diving, like arms broke, jaw cut. He would just keep coming back and coming back. And it was just a different breed at the time.
It was a different breed. And from your perspective, when you said you viewed the correctional officers as a different car, like I know what you mean by that. Do you view that as a bad thing, or because some people will say, oh no, they're peace officers. They should be conduct themselves like professional, not say bad words, carry themselves to a higher standard. Or do you see why they carry themselves the way that they do?
Well, when I first came in, immediately I just hated them.
Right.
Because I was taught to hate him.
Correct.
Despite the fact that I used to work in the kitchen, be like, damn, this dude is cool. I remember thinking one time, if I had 2 Laker tickets, I told the CEO, I'd take you, man. I can never tell nobody that, but because I gotta fucking hate you, and I didn't know why. But, as you grow up and you see like, okay, this is a family man. He's trying to make it to work. And I understand in my later years, I would talk to COs that would say, I saw you come in at 18 years old. And I know you now at 30 years old. Remember that time when you got stabbed? Do you think that shit was easy for me? I literally watched you grow up. You were my barber. You were my clerk. I got to come to work. I got to keep things in check. But every day, we experience the same things as you. They're on the same yard, feeling the same energy, the same tension. So when I start to realize that, I start to look at people as human beings. But at the same time, I also knew that you have a job, I have a job. Your job's to get me, my job's to beat you at that.
Right.
So once I got into a business mind state, but it's always been a really ugly relationship between blue and green.
Basically, it's a treacherous environment, but there is still that human factor. Right?
It creeps through.
So. And I agree. And I've seen in numerous cases, even if somebody an inmate that you knew, and he overdoses and he dies, and I think of one, Messersmith comes to mind. He was on D yard. He was working the program. I was a lieutenant. He overdosed and he passed away. I remember thinking, goddamn, dude was a youngster.
Yeah.
That's sad. That's unfortunate.
And I saw, when I was in Ironwood, we had massive overdoses with fentanyl before I left. And I saw it was the same team. It was the yard cops that respond to the code. Pumping, and I could see them stressed after when the guy dies. Like you fight for your life, and you're like, dang. And I would make it a point to go after him. Like I saw that, man. I appreciate that. And they're like, no, they don't want to talk about it. Like it was really messing them up. So if people could see the human part, but when you're in it, when you're in that environment, there's no.
Do you think the system is designed that way?
100%. And it's a trip too, because when new officers, like there would be new officers that would come in and I would see them, I had already been down and I would see them evolve as an officer, how they would be. Some would be cool, someone pulling you over, searching. Right. And I would be like, man, this guy turned into a complete dickhead, but it's not even his fault. He's just been inserted into a system that just kind of molds you the same way I am.
Groupthink.
It's exactly what prison is, 100% groupthink. And you got those, and it's a trip because you got those moments, those rare moments where, I don't know, maybe I'm just an inmate and a CO kind of maybe connect on something, a Laker game or something, and maybe those little bonds. Hey, what's up, man? And you got to keep. It's always so superficial because of that environment. But those are those human moments that happen, and they happen everywhere. But it's not cool. It's always suppressed because it's supposed to be.
Now, since you're here and we're talking on this subject, and I agree 100% what you say, man. Do you believe there should also be a line in the sand, as opposed to what we are seeing now on the news, on the social media? Like, hey, you're an ADSEG inmate. You're in here for brutally assaulting a staff member.
Yeah.
We're gonna pull you out, or we're gonna play foosball with you. You believe there should be some type of like common sense or a line in the sand?
Now let me answer this before he gives his answer right, cause when I came to prison, if you put your hands on a guard, they definitely was fit to whoop your head. The dude who I mentioned when I was in the hole with Corcoran, Hoover Mike, he told me of an incident, I believe it was in Lancaster, where he had got caught up in assault on a guard. He told me he was in the hole maybe about 3 or 4 days, and about 2 in the morning his doors opened. And he said about 5 or 6 guards ran up in there and beat him until he cried, is what he said. Now, this dude was a big dude, man, at the time. He probably was, and when I say big, I'm talking about naturally big. He wasn't, wasn't lifting no weights or nothing like that. He probably was maybe 6'3", 6'4", probably 260, 270, more out of shape big than looked like he had a physique from working out. Nonetheless, he was a big dude. He told me that they whooped him and beat him. He said for about the next week, every time he went to the bathroom, there was blood in the toilet. He said they beat him until he cried. And so to me, I don't think that's cool, right? I don't think that's cool to run in on an individual like that, because then what that is that's gang activity, right? I came to prison at the time when guards definitely would fight you one-on-one and give you a head-up fade. Now, if that's the situation, that's something different. But to run in there, especially beat you up or beat you while you handcuffed, things of that nature, and then in the event you do fight back, not only do they whoop you, then they turn around and they give you some type of administrative punishment, I think is jacked up, because they have an advantage that you don't have, right? And so that's the part of it I think that's messed up,
As far as like relationship wise,
and or this new California model that they're pushing.
yeah, there has to be a professional line. I mean, my relationship with officers was always professional.
Correct.
In my older years, it was easier to be like, hey, you catch the game, and have some but it has to be, because all my friends that I've had, I've gotten in a fight with. Now, if you get in a fight, you're an officer active, and we're cool and we're friends, and we have an argument, we get in a fight, now hundreds of people are going to be running from both directions. This shit just doesn't work. It's not going to work that way. It's not a friendship.
I like that you said that.
I'm not there. You're not there you're there to protect the security, make sure, my job is to become rehabilitated, become a better person. Your job is to make sure that I do that, or that I don't stab somebody. Now, if we get caught up in conversation, I'm a really good manipulator. Let me get a young 22-year-old officer, and I'm in a wrong mind state. I'll have them working for me.
Easily.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, I don't know. I just, too many things can go wrong. There's really no benefit. Get out, become friends after,
Yeah. Not while in the profession.
Yeah. Especially in that environment. It's just not the environment to be.
So I know we kind of jumped back and forth, but I'm liking where we're painting the picture of how things used to be, where things are now.
Yeah.
Because generations, let's take men, for instance, men of the 80s and 90s are not the men of the 2020s and 2024s. What's your take on that? Have you seen them? How would you explain that change? Less
Testosterone.
Really?
From my cell in prison and, reading magazines stuff, I saw everything become softer. It even happened in prison.
Elaborate on that. Were you seeing the different youngsters come in the system with their dual letters? CDCR number?
Yeah. That would always be my job. Just because your CDC number has more letters than mine doesn't mean you know more than me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was definitely a different kind of person, and you would expect that. You know, it's completely new generations. Things evolved. It didn't make it any less like crazy. Like, Jesus, like what the hell? Does this guy have a whole like Air Jordan sign across his face with a Louis Vuitton on his neck? Like,
Right.
I'm like, whoa. Never had Louis Vuitton in his life, you know, couldn't afford a pair of Jordans, you know. But this was like the legit, you know. But hey, I didn't. It's the way it goes. Those are the youngsters nowadays, and you work with what you work with. And
what I noticed over a period of time is it seemed like the genuine love and respect among the individuals who you affiliated with your car on a day-to-day basis became less and less. Like when I came to prison, right? Of course, the dudes who were there in my car, and especially older dudes, there was a lot of love shown among the homies because a lot of times, you know, you was dealing with first, second generation gangbangers. And it's different because in these gangs, individuals grew up. Like, you know, when people hear the word gangs, they hear the word gangs. But any dude from my generation or earlier will tell you his gang was really his family, a person who he had grew up with. You know, dudes he started banging with, he had been knowing all their lives before they was gang members. They really were true friends, first, second, third, fourth grade. And so you have a natural love, and the individual you are is different, right? And so the way you was raised, when you get to prison, your personality still shows and shines within your car, right? But then later on, when the gang life kicked in, and now you have dudes who, before they even get a chance to grow up, they're introduced to a gang mentality, right? So they're introduced to a different way of thinking. And then what's the term that I'm looking for? They say it's no honor among thieves. I disagree 100% with that, right? Especially in my generation. But later on, honor among thieves did become less watered down. So now you have these dudes coming in with these new scandalous mentalities where it's okay to kill their own homeboys and stuff like that. So if you are thinking it's cool to kill one of your homeboys from your hood, then of course you come to prison. You definitely really don't care about an individual that you are functioning with just because you guys are from the same geographical location. So that's what I seem to notice, that, you know, it was it was much more dissension and treachery. You know, nowadays they got a term called backdooring, where you know, will set your homeboy up or play a role in having your homeboy's life took. You know, when dudes come to prison with that type of mentality and try to function as a collective, there's no real unity, and that's what I started to see more.
In the past, you know, and I did not grow up in that lifestyle, you know, in Los Angeles. You know, I know a lot of people seek validation. They seek that family bond.
Yeah.
Okay. I could see it back then, you know, when you didn't have opportunities that you have now. I mean, you could literally make money off of your cell phone and just, you know, we're talking about vending machines. You think there's any excuse to gangbang now in Los Angeles, or is it still go back to its territorial roots?
I think the motivation is different because, you know, back then you kind of grow up in a neighborhood and it's more of like a neighborhood aspect. Mm-hmm. Whereas now people can have that experience on YouTube. Like you can go through any neighborhood you want in Los Angeles and learn everything you need to know about it, so they can learn their styles and everything. You know, I've met people from gangs that have never actually been to the neighborhood of the gang that they're from.
Wow.
You know, whether it be like in 18th Street or in Lancaster, that has never left Lancaster, or that's just you know,
right,
just an example right there, something like that. And I only use that because that's one of the larger, you know, neighborhoods in Los Angeles. But yeah, it's definitely different in the look, the culture, 100%, man.
What did a normal day for you look like, to include an incident, right? You're going out to include, you hear an alarm, you get down, you prone out, you wake up, you drink your coffee. What did it look like?
So I wake up in the morning at 5 o'clock, first thing I do, I brush my teeth, I plug in my hot pot, I make my coffee, and I sit there. To this day, I still do it with my head kind of against the wall. And I just drink my coffee and I think for about a half hour, clean up my cell. By that time, going out to breakfast, come back, and it'll be yard. You know, in between that time, I'm stretching, I'm doing some reading, just getting ready for my day, for my workout. Head out to yard, 8:30, 9 o'clock. And, you know, having been enough time in prison, I don't need anybody to tell me when something's gonna happen in the yard. You immediately feel it. I pick up on patterns. You know, these two never walk together. What are they doing over there? Just the energy of it. And a lot of times you'll hear it like, hey, stay away from the bars. And the trip of it is even in my later years, you know, I got stabbed as a youngster in prison in Salinas Valley. And so for the rest of my prison career, whenever there would be an incident on the yard, you know, the tension elevates, it would spike my stress level.
Anxiety.
Back to that moment.
Yeah.
Even if I knew, okay, you know, they're going to hit dude over here by the handball courts, he owes money, no matter what, I know the whole situation.
The trigger.
I'm pounding sometimes. And I hated it because you don't want somebody to see you like that because that's a sign of weakness in there. Ooh. And
let me pause this real quick and say I think he's 100% correct. You know, when you go to prison and you see all this violence and stuff, at some point in time, I think early, you're more intrigued by it. It's exciting. You know, you have a gang mentality. You know, they tell you, hey, man, JoJo is getting ready to get stabbed on the yard today. You know, and I would be like, okay, well, damn, I'm supposed to go out there, man, and get me a good seat so I can see all this. But I think at some point in time, once you grow up and kind of you mature, you kind of get tired of and sick of seeing that stuff, right? I remember two good friends, right? Two black dudes. Two young cats. They used to hang together every day. You know, they best of friends. One day we in the day room, they playing cards, and they get into it, right, with each other. They two Crips from LA. So I say, hey man, you know, now they ready to fight. They calling each other to the cell, ready to fight. I say, hey man, you know, y'all, you know, so they get up and actually walk down there. So I go down there, I say, hey man, y'all, you know, y'all homies, y'all hang out every day. They like, hey, chill, this ain't got nothing to do with you, man. Get out the way. Once they told me that, they right, it don't have nothing to do with me. I got out the way, right? But so while I'm in there, what I, you know, when I leave, but I'm hearing them in there fighting, you know, you know, it's a distinct sound when somebody's in the cell fighting. You know, you can hear the feet, you know, brushing on the tennis shoes on the floor, you know, them bumping up stuff. My heart is pounding, right? Even though this has nothing to do with me, it's not gonna, you know, it's not gonna be a negative situation for me. Just knowing what's going on at some point in time, man, I think that, you know, it's like your body is having some type of a reaction to this, you know, to this violence that's going on up in there, right? And so, you know, eventually they come out, they all lumped up, and then the very next day they sitting right back in the day room playing cards, right? And I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at them, and they laughing and joking. And I said to them, y'all some dummies. You know, here you guys are now laughing because we all was cool, right? Here you guys are now laughing and clowning, but you was in there yesterday fighting, man. You know, if you can sit back and chill today and play cards, whatever you was fighting about yesterday wasn't that serious. And then one of them was like, yeah, you know, my bad, chill, man. You know, I just told you to get away because I was heated. But after a while, like I say, man, I think when you grow up and you mature, you know, you get tired of seeing, you know, unnecessary violence. You know, I could see if somebody went in there and stole a dude's TV or whatever. They was fighting over a card game, something that was very simple and you know, and could have been worked out.
And I wasn't going to run anywhere. I wasn't going to do anything. I'm ready to stand, you know.
Right.
But it sometimes it did. It always did. But sometimes it would be bad. Even right before I pulled in Ironwood, they were going to do a little 2-on-1. Two youngsters were going to beat up another guy. It was nothing. They weren't even going to use weapons. But the energy on the yard, it just had me.
Let's elaborate on that. So I think you're referring to the time, because I think I heard you tell this story. You might even said it on my podcast. You're talking about when you got caught in the rotunda?
Yeah. Yeah.
But were they blacks?
Yeah.
Did they mistake you for being white or something?
No. So there was an incident on the yard between the Southerners and the blacks, the Mexicans and the blacks. I wasn't out there in the yard at that time. I was at work. And I'd only been in prison about a year at that time. So I worked in the kitchen at the morning. I was a cook. So they would open my door at 4:30. It was 3 blacks and me and one other Mexican that were the cooks. And they came to my door after the riot happened. They said, look, what they were going to do is they were going to run the Southerners, the Mexicans were going to program one day, work, yard, everything. The next day, they were completely shut down and the blacks would program until everything got,
Right.
squared away. So, the Southerners came to my door and said, look, the cops, they don't know. They just see a white boy. They don't know your background or nothing. They're probably going to open your door to go to work. Slid me a big ass bone crusher to protect yourself. Be ready. I got the speech. So 2 days later, sure enough, my door cracked, 4:30 in the morning.
180 design?
It's a 180, Salinas Valley. Yeah, it was D-Yard. And
So I think, obviously, we failed to mention at the start of the video that even though he's white, he functioned with the Southerners. And so that's what he was doing in the cell with a Southerner. And so that's important in this story for those who may have not caught that.
Sally jumped up, I'm going to go with you. I said, I can't. They're going to see you, So
let me go back a little bit for somebody that may have missed that.
Referring to the time, because I think I heard you tell this story. You might even said it on my podcast. You talking about when you got caught in the rotunda?
Yeah. Yeah.
But were they blacks?
Yeah.
Did they mistake you for being white or something?
No. So there was an incident on the yard between the Southerners and the blacks, the Mexicans and the blacks. I wasn't out there in the yard at the time. I was at work. And I'd only been in prison about a year at that time. So I worked in the kitchen at the morning. I was a cook. So they would open my door at 4:30. It was 3 blacks and me and one other Mexican that were the cooks. And they came to my door after the riot happened. They said, look, what they were going to do is they were going to run the Southerners, the Mexicans were going to program one day, work, yard, everything. The next day, they were completely shut down and the blacks would program until everything got,
Right.
squared away. So, the Southerners came to my door and said, look, the cops, they don't know. They just see a white boy. They don't know your background or nothing. They're probably going to open your door to go to work. Slid me a big ass bone crusher to protect yourself. Be ready. I got the speech. So 2 days later, sure enough, my door cracked, 4:30 in the morning.
180 design?
It's a 180, Salinas Valley. Yeah, it was D-Yard. And my cellie jumped up, I'm going to go with you. I said, I can't. They're going to see you, Gives me a hug. I stick it in my pocket and I walk through the day room. Now, in the 180 design, they have that little window.
Real quick, and I
Yeah.
don't mean to cut you off because I'm trying to find the source of where you said you would get the anxiety. Did you have anxiety then? Did you already know what time it was then?
No, 100%. I mean,
did?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 19. It's a complete different vibe. You're on the streets gangbanging with your homies, you're drinking, you're partying.
Right.
You can find the courage to do anything.
Correct.
I'm wearing a pair of pants, a t-shirt, I have a bone crusher, and I'm going in there with 3 grown-ass men. These are 40-year-old men.
And
I'm terrified.
This is fight or flight. This is primal.
Yeah.
Basic human survival.
As my door's cracked, I'm getting dressed, my hands are shaking, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you're working yourself up into like a, what I
Now,
learned later, like
were
a
they making
bloodlust.
eye contact to you?
I didn't even know at the time. My door cracked, and I'm in C section. B section's right here. There's a window. They saw my door crack. Just like they told me your door might crack, they knew my door might crack. I didn't know. I'm a rookie.
Right.
They saw me the whole time. I walked through the day room. They opened my door all the way. It's in my pocket. I walked through the day room as soon as I hit that rotunda.
As soon as you hit that rotunda.
On me. 3 40-year-old men.
Now,
So what he's describing is in Salinas Valley or any 180, the building is not one big open whole building like you might see on one of these prison documentaries. The building is broken down into 3 sections. It's A section, B section, C section. They call it a 180 because that's the view of the building the guard in the tower has. He has a 180 view of that whole entire building. So when you first come into the building, there's A section. And there's a little door. If you happen to live in A section, you would go into A section. I believe, if my memory serves me correct, there are 8 cells on the bottom, 8 cells on the top, right? Then there's a wall, and that wall divides you from B section. There's a door that the tower can open automatically from the tower, and If not, then you're confined to your section. Then there's a little hallway that you walk through that goes around to all these different sections. So now the tower's up top. He can look to A section. He looks down, he opens up who he needs to let out. Then he goes to B section. So A section is no longer in his view. I believe he said he's in C section. So obviously the dudes who were going to the kitchen to cook we're in B section. So, and also what's the difference in a 180 is they're not releasing you to go outside to go to the chow hall. The dining hall and the kitchen and all that is connected to the building. So you leave your cell, you go through the little hallway, then they open another door and you go right into the kitchen. So now as he's being released from C section, the black dudes, they can look over there through the hall and look up, and see, especially if he's on the top tier, see doors being open. So they're aware that he's coming already because of the design of the building. And once again, if the guard is over there because the guard is in the top, he's still letting people out. He opens the door and he comes in to go through the rotunda. He's still over there popping sales. He doesn't even have a view of what's going on until he actually comes back and sees, whatever's transpiring underneath him.
It's set up because I've only toured 180 Designs. Is the officer's area anywhere near there?
At 4:30 in the morning, it's the first watch.
Oh,
so
wow.
he's doing count probably in another building.
Wow, dude. So you were on your own.
Yeah.
You were on your
you
own.
had the tower.
But if he's not paying attention,
the ceiling is all glass. But the thing was, he was over in the kitchen area, letting all the other kitchen workers.
So they were on you.
Yeah, we were on. We were going at it. For me, it felt like forever, but they said it was probably around 20 seconds.
And ever since that incident, after that, you would always get triggered when there was an alarm in the yard.
Yeah.
And that happened on your first year. So you did 29 years and 3 months. That's a lot of freaking spikes of anxiety.
Constant. And I had, it's a trip because now that I'm out, I've completed my sentence. I paroled GP. I did everything, that I was supposed to do.
Right.
I can say that for my entire career, it always in the back of my head, like, I don't want to get fucking stabbed again. I always thought, like, whether I did something right, wrong, is it going to be mistaken identity?
Yeah.
It happened to me at a young age, and it just stayed.
Dude.
And I attribute it, like I told the parole board, me becoming a heroin addict because of that. Because I tried heroin about 3 weeks after that for the first time.
Oh, that's self-medicating.
Yeah, because people would come up. I took 27 holes.
27 holes, man.
At 19 from grown men.
And I think you told the story that you said you were proned out and you looked over and you saw the weapons on the floor.
Yeah, after it was over, we're all proned out. I saw 2 knives. You could see them wrapped, and I'm like,
What went through your head?
well, I was exhausted. I kept breathing because they handcuffed me, and every breath hurt. And I was like, fuck, they got me. And when I went to you put me in the ambulance, I went to the MTA. It was literally like a movie scene. I pulled off my gray shirt, I held it up, and you could see the lights. You could see the beams coming through, and I turned around, and there was no blood. The blood comes later that night. Like, it would soak my sheets for probably about 3 nights.
Now, did you earn a so-called quote-unquote profound respect
Yes.
for that?
That's like, it was like, sort of like my proof that I told you guys, like, I'm here. And people would come to my door and they'd be like, fuck those fools in. It felt so good. It felt so good.
Does reputation carry itself in prison?
Today?
Then.
Yes, 100%. 100%.
So I'm going to stop here, right? Like I always do a lot of times when I react to videos, because I want you guys to go and watch the rest of the video. Once again, the name of this channel is Hector Bravo Unhinged. It's a very good interview. Shout out to Hector Bravo, and also shout out to Brian Lonely James. I've seen him interviewed on several different platforms, right? He's always honest. He's always sincere. And that's one thing I like about him, right? I happen to just pick this particular interview to react to due to the fact that Hector, being a former CO, in my opinion, he asked some great questions, right? And so, once again, the name of this channel is called Hector Bravo Unhinged. The name of the video is called Brian James, 29 years behind bars. Anyway, man, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.